What's going on, y'all? I'm Cam Best. He is Lamby Series. Together, we are 8 Cubes, and we are going to be going through the 8 most important topics in Marvel Snap this week, starting with the upcoming Season Pass card, Hope Summers. Hope Summers is a 3/4. Whenever you play a card in her lane, you get +1 energy. She has immediate synergy with things like Nightcrawler, Jeff, and Vision, which you can play in her lane, then move out. You can play multiple cards in her lane on the same turn for extra energy. You could do things like Hope Summers and Wasp for a 5-drop, and then a 6-drop, all a turn early. You also have some likely synergy with a card like Doctor Doom. You play Hope Summers into a card, into Doctor Doom. And of course, there is some additional synergy where if you have Hope Summers, you play War Machine into the Hope Summers lane on turn 5, and you are then able to play the Infinite and Ebony Maw on turn 6. These are all extremely powerful things that Hope Summers lets you do. The way I look at her is like, you remember what X-23 did for Destroyed X? Hope Summers gives that ability to God knows how many decks. I think she's quite interesting and could be a card that the metagame ends up evolving around. Of course, also viable in Thanos. Lamby, what are your thoughts on Hope Summers?
You remember what old Lockjaw did in Thanos? remember what's you remember what's 3+1? Okay, so this is a bit of a different 3+1. Like, okay, so what Hope Summers does is that okay, so I read her a bit wrongly. I don't know why I thought like you couldn't like gain her energy on the same turn you play her, which made me think that she's only good on like drawing her on turn 3. But if you draw her on turn 4, it's like 3+1, and then on turn 5 you play a 6. So she's like a ramp 2, right? Plus now she got like confirmed to be like a 3/4 instead of a 3/3 or something. So like she's a bit better, relevantly better. I can see her. I don't even think you need to like play Wasp related stuff with her. I think you just play her in a deck that has 1 cost cards, so that she gets like playable even on like top deck on turn 4, right? 3+1 into a 6 on 5. I think that's like super relevant. She's gonna become quite a generic RAM 2, I feel. Like you can play her in a lot of decks, right? Like obvious ones like you said, Thanos. Hela could play her just because it skips a bit of the curve. You could even play her in there was this period. I think people are doing stuff like playing Psylocke into like Vision or Black Bolt. There was like that period for a little bit. So
No,
it's
there
like,
wasn't. You're talking about one person ever who was doing that. That's
okay, yeah, it was
W. Only
It was
W
Yeah.
is doing that.
But like now you can do it again with a different card, and
Yeah.
then you can play Darkhawk on turn, I don't know. Okay, but like I'm just saying that it's like a different card, but similar to Psylocke also in the sense that like it's a RAM tool, generic RAM tool. I don't think it's just like strictly better than Wave kind of thing. I think it like complements a deck that can run Wave of sorts, right? Also you can simply just play her on turn 3 or whatever turn, and then on the next turn just play a card into her location for whatever reason, get the extra energy on the other turn, right? Like it doesn't have to be specifically like, oh, Hope plus Wasp, Hope +1, because it could just be Hope and then the next big card and then the next bigger card 1 turn earlier. So it's quite relevant of a card. I think she will be quite impactful in the meta.
Yeah, she seems so scary to me. And I'm not sure exactly what direction you go with her. Like, the way I see Hope, it's like, okay, you can either build for Hope and be a Hope deck and be like, all right, well, I'm going to, like, play Falcon. And, like, I'm just going to get, like, 6 extra energy per game, right? Like, or you can not build for Hope and just be like, I just have this card that's going to let me get some extra energy some of the time. And, like, in that use case, she's more like, Wave or Lockjaw, where she's like, she's just there, and it's like, sometimes she's going to let you do something unfair. And the rest of the time, it's just like, yeah, I'm just going to get an extra energy or two over the course of this game from my 3/4, right?
You know what people will do with her? People will try and play her in Surfer because she's a 3 cost.
I really hope
She's-
people don't do that.
but she's a but she's a 3 cost. Every time they release a new 3 cost, she's a Surfer card. But like,
Oh, man. I feel like they
no,
finally
but
done. No, there's no way people say that about this card. I refuse to believe that.
you'll
No
be
one's going to be like,
surprised.
Hope is a Surfer card. Come on, that's not
You
real.
will be surprised.
Okay, but hear me out.
What if she's a Surfer
what if
card?
she's a Surfer card? Yeah, no. I do think she's like mechanically unique enough that you are definitely encouraged not to play her in Surfer, because like unless you're
That's
playing
true.
Wasp, you're not using her to turbo out of Sarah 1 turn earlier, because like you start getting your energy on turn 5 most of the time with her. So it's like, all right, when is this actually going to be useful, right? Like you're a deck that wants to turbo out 6 drops earlier. That's when it's going to be useful. You want to play a 6 on 5. There's currently a deck that really wants to play 6s on 5. That's Thanos, right? Like there are decks out there that are like really trying to do this. And so you end up in this situation where like it kind of makes sense to go in a deck that already exists. I do think that a lot of people underestimated just how much going to 7 energy on the final turn of the game can do
Yeah.
for you. And Hope, for example, can take you way farther than that, right? Like if you play 3 cards in her on turn 5, you go to 8, 9 energy on the final turn of the game, right? Like you can actually
Mm.
just do a lot of stuff with her. You play like, I don't know, Jeff Nightcrawler, another card in there on turn 5. And you're just looking at like that's just a solid 9 energy on turn 6. Like that is extremely strong. I'm really interested in this card. I think Second Dinner, you could argue they haven't released a lot of incredibly strong cards recently, and this is absolutely one of them. Like, I also think that she makes Corvus Glaive look terrible. Like, Corvus Glaive comes out, and it's like, that's a 3/5 that gives you some energy. And it's like, Hope Summers is like a 3/5 that gives you a 3/4 that gives you probably more energy with probably less of a downside. Let's talk about Pixie. Lamby, what do you think of the 2/1 that swaps all the costs of the cards in your deck?
This card is scary. Okay, it's either gonna be scary good or scary bad on release, because I feel like this is one of those cards that, okay, so let me just try and like explain Pixie to you in a way I would like to explain Mr. Negative, right? So a Mr. Negative deck is basically a deck that if you draw Mr. Negative early, it should snowball your win rate crazily. So I feel like a Pixie deck would be similar. But my issue right now is what exactly is this deck, right? Like a functioning deck could probably function without drawing Pixie. But now if you want to put Pixie into this deck, like, is there a deck right now that needs to draw Pixie and then can be exponentially better? And if it doesn't draw Pixie, can it win? I don't even know what that deck is, right? Because we need to know that Pixie swaps costs randomly in the deck. So you could be swapping like a 1 cost with a 6. That's
Well, yes,
perfect.
she does. Why
Yeah,
would
I
she
mean,
not?
yeah, she does. She does. But like, she could also swap like a 6 cost with another 6 or 5 with another
Correct.
5, which
Yes.
is so random. And also, we need to think about the ratios, right? Like, what deck has card ratios that would benefit you even playing the Pixie? Or do we have a new deck completely that could benefit from Pixie? I currently can't think of anything that like could slot her nicely and actually benefit from her effect. But the problem is, if there is that deck, and I think there might be, it could be really scary.
So I think Pixie's second line of text, where it says the cards had to start in your deck, is really telling as to like what Second Dinner was doing with this card. Because
Yeah,
when it was
Thanos.
originally data mined, the cards did not have to start in your deck, and it was just like,
Yeah.
oh, that's Thanos card. Like that just goes.
It's an instant Thanos card, yeah.
Yeah, like, oh, that's a Thanos card. You want a deck that plays a bunch of 1s and 6s, and it's like, oh, well, that's a deck that plays a bunch of 1s and 6s. Enjoy your free Magneto. Like that's pretty much the major issue with it, and it seems like they were very aware that that would be an issue, and they were like, that's not happening anymore. We're good. Like we're good on that. And so when they said we're good on that, it sort of leaves me wondering what the hell were they doing with this that wasn't that? Like, what does
Yeah.
this card do
I'm
if
trying to
it's
think
not
of
that?
like decks that can play multiple 1s and 5s, right? Like I think to like Silk Smooth, or like maybe the old Angela Kitty decks. Like, you have Visions, Legions, Black Bolts, or whatever, or Arrows, and then you have like Night Crawlers, Kitties. Maybe that's a good ratio to have a potential swap around, but I'm not too sure.
Well, the cool thing about Pixie is that you can play Pixie into your own Mobius, and so it has no downside. And so,
Mhm.
like if you pull that off, it's like that's cool. But like also, that's a 2/1 and a 3/3, so you better be getting some
Yeah,
upside out of that
you better
too.
hit hard on next
Yeah,
few draws for sure.
yeah. Let's talk about Lockjaw, who has, I think we both agree, like maybe lost its place in both Thanos and maybe Hela too. Like this was a nerf that like I looked at it and I was like, I don't know if that's enough, but it seems like it was enough. Like people playing Thanos right now, it's like Lockjaw is really not doing a lot. I don't think I've lost to like Lockjaw rolls since the nerf, actually, now that I think about it. Like I don't think it does anything ever. When I play it, it's just like, oh, that's not very good. And it really does end up in a spot where you wouldn't think that there are cases where like 4 is that much worse than 3, but in a deck like Thanos, it's very true because 4 is where you start playing Cull Obsidians, right? Like 4 is where you start really putting stats on the board. 4 is where you start like you cheating out your 5-drop off a time stone. Moving it up the curve in Thanos specifically really made it so you had to choose between playing the Lockjaw game plan and playing the other game plan. And the whole point of the Lockjaw game plan was that it synergized with the other game plan. You would go stone plus cull. You would go stone plus a 5-drop, right? Like you would do that kind of stuff. And you can't really do that now. It really does clunk. And so I guess I just want to say, like, kudos to Second Dinner for pulling off a Lockjaw nerf that keeps the card itself. Like, if you were still playing, Thor Lockjaw, you would still probably try it. But it keeps it out of Thanos specifically. I think that's really impressive.
Yeah. Personally, because I recently just casted the Johnson Cup and I watched quite a bit of the thing as well. Like people are still playing Lockjaw and Thanos, and I think I casted / watched like 9 games, and in one game it finally did something which was not relevant anyway. So like you mentioned, and I think I want to echo the point which I think is super important is in Thanos previously, at least with the current builds that we have, Lockjaw was like you didn't have to make a choice. Like Lockjaw was always the best option on turn 3 into turn 4, but now you had to choose between playing Devil Dino or YOLOing with Lockjaw plus Stone on turn 5, right? Because you play the Lockjaw on turn 4, you can't Dino and Stone on turn 5. You have to choose one. Basically, not just Dino, Vision as well, which is a big deal. So now you need to, in your 18 card slightly more inconsistent deck than everyone else, you need to choose between 2 options, and usually the Lockjaw option is slightly worse, because if you're playing a 1 cost card into a Lockjaw on turn 5, right, the other 3 energy is at best you get Kyra, at worst you do nothing. So like I feel like Lockjaw right now, which is amazing because 1 cost increase and quite a bit of a power increase didn't seem that bad, right? But it is, because the decks that he's good in cannot afford to make the choice between Lockjaw or just simply playing a normal card, So I think even in Hela, this is very relevant as well, because what they used to do was they go like Lockjaw on 3, Jubilee into Lockjaw on turn 4, and just like go crazy and stuff like that. And also it just hurts the curve a bit. Like now Lockjaw in Hela is strictly like, if you top deck it on turn 5, it's like what, Lockjaw plus Blade 4+1. If not, you don't ever really get to play stuff into the Lockjaw in time for turn 6, right? So I do feel like Lockjaw, this nerf is like secretly genius, right? Like if you think about it, it really lowers the play rate in the decks that it's good in and keeps the card intact. So I think it's quite a smart nerf.
Yeah, I'm like legitimately shocked at how effective it was. Like I was like, are we sure this does enough? And now I'm like, oh my god, you guys are so much smarter than me. Like I had no idea this would work this well.
Yeah, I didn't realize it would be that painful though. Then I tried it and I was like, oh my god.
Yeah. It's like, oh man, this is tough. I just wanted to give a little bit of a shout out to like early metagames. My tier list research this week has involved just like an understanding that like nothing is solidified, no roles have been defined yet. And because no roles have been defined yet, there's this really interesting interplay where there's like a ton of viable decks right now. And that's not to say that there will continually be a ton of viable decks. It's more just like without a defined meta predator at the top of the game, something that you have to be accounting for, everything is a little bit more viable because there's nothing telling you that it's not, right? And so with Thanos falling off a bit, with Loki, like Loki still exists, but there's this weird thing that's happening where like, okay, if you're a destroy player and they play Loki, you're gonna win unless they Loki, you're null and you're death, right? Like you're gonna win unless that happens, right? It's like, you know how that works. If you're a discard player and they're a Loki gamer, they can get some really bad Lokis off of that. If you're a tribunal player and they're a Loki gamer, you kind of just instantly win the game unless they're running Enchantress, right? Like there's this weird bit where like more and more decks are just incidentally immunized to Loki for reasons I can't really figure out, but they just are, right? Like She-Not, right? If Loki is not, like, if Loki plays the card Loki against She-Not and is not playing Snowguard to beat the Limbo, the She-Not deck is gonna win. And like, there's this weird thing where like Loki's still a really strong card, but it's kind of shocking what a high percentage of the metagame there is that just randomly beats him. The interesting thing for me is I'm going back towards like a mid-range Thanos build, and I will tell you, the card Loki beats the hell out of mid-range Thanos. Like, losing that Lockjaw asymmetry, all of that, it beats the crap out of mid-range Thanos. But, like, we might be entering a meta, because, like, Loki's primary reason for existing is it beats the crap out of mid-range Thanos. It beats the crap out of like mid-range Darkhawk, right? It's a mid-range beater. You're playing like your Zabu Shang-Chi deck. It beats you up, beats you to death. But they just nerfed those two decks really badly. Like they just really nerfed those two decks. And so now it's like not even Loki necessarily has a reason to exist beyond being I'm Loki and I'm pretty strong, right? Like the roles haven't been defined in this metagame. And I think that makes things very interesting.
Yeah, so Loki has always been the best when, like, the card itself has always been the best when the metas involve like playing just singular good cards, right? Like we use the Thanos example, like you get their Devil Dinos, you get their sometimes called Obsidians, Magnetos. So like I guess what you're trying to say, and I kind of do agree a little bit, is that there's a lot of decks right now that they are okay, because people used to beat Loki by running bad stuff in their deck. Now you don't really have to run bad stuff per se. Like some decks just have natural synergies that Loki doesn't like to steal, right? Like we can go with Phoenix for Tribunal, all that kind of stuff. And yeah, the decks that it beats up is the same. It beats up on the decks that just has one good card, many singular good cards that don't need each other. The meta is not just all that right now. There's a bunch of other stuff you can play. So yeah, early meta right now, I do believe that I think it's a bit okay to play Loki right now simply because like the Lockjaw got nerfed and like the gap between that and the Thanos deck is reduced. But like if people start to play other things, like more things become more popular that have natural synergies within themselves and not to be stolen and used later, aka Loki, then I guess Loki's place would fall down a little bit.
That's sort of the fascinating thing about this. Because like when Loki first came out, it was like, okay, Silk Smooth was the mid-range deck that like people were playing, right?
Yeah,
right
then the deck just
now,
died.
yeah, but like right now, that's discard, which is much harder for Loki to properly steal. Like it's much harder for Loki to get the value out of your discard cards than it is for Loki to get the value out of your Silk Smooth Loki. Like that's like
Yes.
it's just like little things like that. Where like the dominant mid-range deck, like the main mid-range points don't get Shang-Chi deck is harder matchup now for Loki than it was in the past. Like just little stuff like that just keeps happening. And it's like it's actually shocking the degree to which I think Loki has just warped the meta by existing. But it's
yeah.
Go.
It's funny because like this card is like a decent mid-range deck right now, right? But it's a decent mid-range deck that has certain level of synergies, right? Like you need to discard specific things and like all that kind of stuff. Whereas in the past, with the Silk Smooth example, Loki really beat up on that one because it was singular card mid-range decks. Like it's mid-range decks that don't need two card combos. Whereas for this card, you need like certain cards to pair together to do your mid-range thing. And it's easy to do it if you are the discard deck. But if you are stealing them at the wrong time, it's actually really bad to be stolen. So Loki, yeah, I agree that like versus Silk Smooth, it was a lot easier just because they just play one thing. And the one thing can be played whenever, right?
Yes.
It's like they're all gladiators, essentially.
Yes, it was all free. Like it was that matchup was so free. Because you would play Loki and then you would just do their entire deck on turn 5. And it was like, okay, I win the game.
The whole curve is played on
the
turn
game's
5.
over. Like I did what you did and I have better stuff, but you can't do that to discard. You can't you're not getting the same value out of a discard's Mobius that they are. You're not getting this, you're not getting the value out of their Dracula that they are unless you get their Apocalypse and pitch the rest of your hand, which you're not as good at doing as they are. And so like you have this weird thing where like so many decks are just incidentally better into Loki than when Loki came out. And like that is a fascinating dynamic for this early meta. But the main topic of the early meta subject is just like there's so much you can do when the best deck is not official yet. Like and when the way you find a good deck is existing in the context of the other stuff you play against, right? And the context of what you play against is so undefined right now. People are really still trying to figure stuff out. What to do with Thanos, what to do with Loki, how do I approach beating those decks? What do those decks even look like right now? It's so vague, and that means that there's so much room right now for you to play like your pet deck. You can do that probably. They called me a madman. I have been saying that War Machine, based on how Electro and Jeff works, should let you play Infinite and Ebony Maw on the final turn of the game, or, you know, on the not final turn of the game if you have the energy. Shout out to Hope Summers. And yesterday, Glenn Jones confirmed that this was the correct interpretation of his text. War Machine will let you play Infinite and Ebony Maw, and frankly, I think that makes him an extremely powerful card. War Machine, of course, a 4/6 that says your cards can go anywhere next turn, or like text cannot restrict your cards next turn. I don't know the exact wording of the card. Effectively, what it means is all the cards in your hand are Jeff, the baby land shark, and you can just do whatever you want with them as long as you have the energy. I, of course, immediately start thinking, all right, well, I'm going to put Hope Summers, War Machine, Infinite, Ebony Maw in like a million different decks, right? Like, I am going to try to War Machine on 5 into Infinite Ebony Maw on 6 and just be like, I have the She-Not endgame in my normal deck.
Yeah, I would actually, as in, I like that all about War Machine, but I actually liked it a bit before already because, like, War Machine, okay, firstly, 4/6 Zabu card, right? Okay, that's one. Secondly, it's one of those cards that I feel very comfortable if I can just slam it on turn 4 or 3. And like okay, so firstly, even if you don't get to actually fully use the effect, I don't really care because of the stat line, it's decent. But then there's so many times I feel like in Conquest, Battle Mode, or whatever, there are so many locations that this card just lets you access, right? It's crazy. Like, you can access Crimson Cosmos very often with this card with your smaller little cards. You can do a lot of things, without even talking about the synergies that we went, like KM mentioned, like the whole Ebony Maw, the Infinite and whatsoever. I just like the card because it's just a generically good statted card that lets you access a lot of locations whereby your deck normally cannot, So I actually think this card has a lot of potential as being just a straight up good release card. Like, on release, it's probably going to be quite decent. In the future, it's also going to have use case just because its effect is quite global. Like, you can do a lot with it. Like, every time there's like locations that you feel like, I can't do anything about that one, War Machine lets you do something about that location or play there at least. So I kind of like it, right? I kind of like the card just because it's able to, like, you can slot it in many decks. That's all I can say. You can play it in many decks, and it's just going to be sort of quite effective.
I think the thing that really sticks out to me about this card is just how much I want to run it in Black Knight, where it's like, I'm looking for a deck that's already wanting to play the Infinite, right? I don't want to like just put the whole package in a bunch of other stuff, but if I could put the Infinite, if a deck that already wants to run the Infinite, it's like, okay, suddenly we're really talking. Like, we have extreme ability to cheat. And not only is Black Knight a deck that already wants to run the Infinite, Black Knight's a deck that already wants to run Zabu too. So you just get this for free. Like, this is just a card that you get. You get to just play this 4/6 and play your Infinite, right? And suddenly we're starting to look at like a very threatening piece of Marvel's Snap tech, where it's just like, I am more or less guaranteeing that if I draw the Infinite at any point during this game, it's getting dropped on your head somehow. I don't know how. It could be War Machine. It could be Ebony Blade. It could be Ghost Rider. I don't know how I'm going to drop 20 power on your head, but I know it's going to happen.
Actually, this card being in the meta will, at least at the start or hopefully for a longer period of time, make Professor X extremely unpopular. Extremely unpopular, right? Because you invest 5 energy to play a 1 power card that's supposed to win a location. But if there's like War Machines to any extent in the meta, it just completely nullifies that effort because I'm playing a 4/6 that lets me access your 5/1 location that's supposed to be 1. That's so worth it. And like, the moment War Machine becomes like even semi-popular, Prof is gonna disappear. So that's gonna be quite exciting.
This actually brings us to our next topic, which is we're both playing Profex and Thanos again. And neither of us are particularly happy about that. Because it's like, all right, okay, the Lockjaw stuff sucks, so I guess we're playing Profex. I guess that's what we're doing. We're playing Professor X again. We're just doing the thing.
Nothing much to do.
And it's just like, oh man, I cannot wait for, Mockingbird and to a lesser extent War Machine to come out so we can stop doing this crap. We're gonna figure out if Thanos can be good without Lockjaw as a crutch, without Professor X as a crutch, like without these cards that are just like, that have defined the archetype the entire time it's been out. It's either been a Lockjaw deck or a turn 4 Prof deck, right? I want to know if Thanos can be good without that. And if it can't, then, well, maybe we can give the drawback to Soulstone. Just cough, cough, Len Jones. I hope you're watching this. Like, this is a situation where it's like, I really desperately think that this season could be a breath of fresh air for Thanos, where at least we find out if Thanos can exist in a different context than it has the entire time it's been in the game.
Yeah, so one thing I've started experimenting with, and I've been asking some of my community to try as well, is like you just play Cow Obsidian in any Thanos deck. Like you just play Cow Obsidian in
Yes.
your Prof X Thanos deck, just cause it's like stats. Like we can move towards a more mid-range-ish Thanos deck right now. Like maybe you can play Prof, maybe you don't have to play Prof. But like cards like Devil, Dino, and Vision have been seen in both versions of the deck, right? For good reason, because they can just be in any Thanos deck. And like of course, on the off chance you get to ramp to a 6 early, or you can play like multiple 6s. The Blob is still a card that you can play in any Thanos deck also, just because, well, it fits perfectly in Thanos deck. So you don't really need to. Personally, I feel like the version of Thanos that I want to try most right now is like the Lockjaw Thanos like stuff, but we remove the least useful 6s and 5s, so we don't have to rely on the jaw. We play stuff like Wave, Psylocke, Timestone, obviously, because they naturally ramp you a little bit. And then you just play cards on curve, right? Cards that are slightly bigger than what they are supposed. Like normally people play a 4-on-4, but like if you have Timestone, you play a 5-on-4 still. Psylocke, you play a 5-on-4. Wave, you can play a 6-on-4. So like these play patterns don't really need Lockjaw. And I feel like if the deck is balanced out to the point whereby you don't actually play that many 6s or like that many 5s, if there's that nice balance, it becomes like a mid-range Thanos deck with Cow Obsidian, those kind of cards being like the core. And I don't know if you want Scar, but like we can see. But like I feel like there is definitely a way to play Thanos, which is like more of a we use the Hearthstone example, the Murloc Paladin Thanos, right? The just play 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and win.
Lamby, you have been a Mobius advocate recently. Would you care to tell me why you are so interested in Mobius?
Okay, I haven't been the biggest Mobius fan in my life in general. I always felt this 3-3 was very cringe. Like it's just a 3-3. It feels horrible to play. But now I feel like we are like very priced into play. At least for now, because the matter is there's a lot of Loki. Yeah, we did say that like Loki is beatable right now, but people are still playing a lot of Loki right now because well, the Lockjaw Thanos matchup is so much better right now, right? The Hela matchup is also so much better right now. So like people are gravitating a little bit back to Loki, and like beating Loki, like you can say that there's stuff that we don't want them to steal, but the fact is if they actually do steal your stuff, it's still a lot of free stats. So I feel like naturally you would want a card that you can just play down that does not make you auto lose if they steal at the right time or the right card. So I think Mobius is just a natural fit here. I mean, of course, there's also like the other applications of like being used versus certain locations like Elysium or Titan, which is crazy strong, versus Destroy, they can't play Death. Like I still am on the what's that called? On the mindset that playing this 3-3 feels a bit weird and bad.
On the
But like
fence?
on the fence, yeah. I'm still on the fence that you're playing this 3-3 card is like a bit like so little stats. But like sometimes it's necessary, you know, like I've actually put Mobius back into my Loki decks, and because of the amount of mirrors I'm seeing, like I think it's actually pretty useful right now. So this might be a card for the moment kind of thing. And obviously maybe in the future and Mockingbird, if it becomes like super relevant, it will be a card for that moment as well. But for now, I think playing Mobius is quite warranted. Even if if you're playing Loki, you can try fitting it in your Loki decks. I know people have been fitting it in their Thanos decks as well, just to be a bit more decent into Loki. So yeah, Mobius tech card of the moment, I'm pretty sure.
I can +1 that I'm on Mobius in my Loki deck, and occasionally I'm also on Rogue in my Loki deck
Oh yeah,
because
same.
of the Mobius. So it's like
Yeah.
it becomes
Grab my
very
Mobius.
quickly like I think one of the things that's happened in this early meta is not so much that like people are playing Loki because it's good, it's people are playing Loki because everything else is bad. And so it's just like, all right, I guess I'll just try to play a Loki deck that beats Loki because I'm also a little bit lost.
Yeah, it's the easiest thing to gravitate back to, right? Because
Yeah.
it's been like only a few days since the Lockjaw like nerf, and the Lockjaw has been a part of our lives for a very long time. It's been a core part of our winningness in many decks for the
Oh my
longest
god,
time, right?
yes.
So yeah, so like now that he's a lot less winning, the natural easiest gravitation back to is like the Loki deck, and like it's not even difficult to play, right? Loki right now, it's like quite easy compared to last time. So I feel like it's just a natural like uprising of
Yeah.
the Loki meta again for now. And then, well, we'll see where we go from here next
But
month.
like I will say I'm a lot less worried about it because it's like, yeah, there's a natural uprising in the Loki meta, sure, but it's like that's like not because it's the best deck. That's just because people don't know what else to do. Like
it's
that's
it's
like
just widely seen right now.
yes,
Yeah.
it's just it's a lot of places, but it's like the world's farthest from unbeatable. Like it
Mm.
is when you look at like untapped stats for the top 10%, the winningest decks all tend to be discard right now. Like basically every single one of them is like it's discard. And like Loki, it's like pretty far down there. It's like what the hell is going on, right? Like, but that's not actually all
Yeah.
that surprising. Like Loki is a safe pick for good players because so many of the top 10% have put in so much work to get to that point, right? Like it's
Agreed.
like that's what's been happening, right? Like everyone in there is just like a good Loki player at this point. And so it's like instead of branching out, instead of playing these decks that we're A less familiar with and B not sure are worth investing in, Loki is a fine pick. It's not like it's bad or anything. It's just it's getting to a point where relative to its own power, more people are playing it than probably should. Let's talk about a deck that just like whips Loki, like just beats it horribly. Just absolutely beats it into the ground, and that's the Shuri Nimrod. That is a deck that is not necessarily like something that stands on its own, but I know one of my friends has been playing a lot of Phoenix Force with Shuri Nimrod in it. And I remember playing against him, and he played absolutely nothing for 3 turns, played a Shuri on turn
Yeah.
4, and it was like, oh, if he plays a Nimrod here, I actually just lose the game. Like if there is a like Nimrod here, I am dead. It doesn't matter what I've done. If he goes Shuri Nimrod and blows it up twice, I've lost the game. I instantly die. I remember another time I played against another one of my friends doing the same thing, and it was like I was going to lose the game if I did not very specifically scam like a location change into clogging him to prevent him from getting a Nimrod, and that is what ended up happening. This is it's not unbeatable, but if you're playing Loki and your opponent does nothing and then plays a Shuri on turn 4, you're probably gonna die. Like that is not something you are equipped to handle. It's very, very tough to deal with.
Yeah, this thing has been around since I remember actually talking about this way back near our first few 8 Cubes
Hmm.
episodes as well. Because it's been around since then, right? Like August last year or something.
Yeah.
This whole like do nothing, play Shuri into Nimrod into just boom boom, destroy
Yep.
it twice, and then you just lose.
Yes.
Shang-Chi proof, by the way. So like yeah, Loki doesn't want to play Loki versus this deck because there's nothing you really want to steal, right? Like if you're popping the Nimrod you stole, you're also popping everything else you developed from turn 1, 2, 3. And like the thing is they don't develop anything. They just play Shuri Nimrod and pop. So like they don't have to worry about that. And like honestly, okay, so this does die very badly to Professor X. But like
Yes.
so it's very interesting, right? So this is the popular decks right now is Loki by nature of people not wanting to really explore and going for a safe pick. People are still playing Thanos in its whatever form because I guess it's still functional with a Lockjaw, of course. So these two prominent decks, and then we have the Shimmy, the Shuri Nimrod. It works very differently versus both decks, right? Like one of it is the Prof X deck, the other one is a deck that steals your stuff and doesn't do anything with it. So it's it's kind of interesting. Like it's just there. And I guess if you are playing against the remnants of the Thanos, Lockjaw, and Joyous, this is also quite insane, right? Because there's no Prof X in that deck, and you just like do the normal Shuri Nimrod destroy it stuff, and they can't shang you. They don't have a Shadow King main deck. They just die still.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I'm personally a very not fan of this deck because it's very one trick pony ish. But you know, if you like, if this is your thing, if this is your way of like combating the meta right now, then like, what can I say, right? Like
Jet
the
is
Phoenix Force.
somewhere punching air right now.
Yeah, no, because the Phoenix Force portion of this deck is so much less relevant than dying to Shuri Nimrod into destroy stuff. Like the Jet deck that he played, the deck that Jet played is very all in on the Phoenix Force and has a lot of ways to like manipulate and move the Phoenix whatsoever. This one is really like I actually fear them not doing the early thing and then like just playing
Yes.
Shuri Nimrod, and I'm like, oh, all right, my planning is out the window. Yeah, that's way scarier. This deck, like it's a bit more linear, but at the same time, if they hit what they are supposed to hit, you just die.
I actually find it harder to play because there's so much like, do I save my cards for later or do I play them earlier kind of deal. Like I find it because like rationing your cards between your two plans is quite difficult because you are a deck that needs your, Venom or Deathlock or Carnage to blow up your multiple man, but you're also a deck that needs 2 of those in hand to get your Nimrod value. And so like you're in this very odd spot where it's like figuring out your priorities, like you can make a call and then draw the wrong card the next turn, and your call will instantly be wrong. It's like that is a really punishing deck to play, in my opinion. It's good, but it's legitimately difficult when you have to make those decisions.
Yeah. So this Nimrod one on for me is kind of interesting because okay, so I don't like this deck, but what I realize when I play against this deck or when I like just explore the deck a little bit is that the transitioning might be like obvious, like you mentioned, a bit sus, right? Because you don't know when to use the cards, when to hold, when to not hold. But I feel like this has the easiest natural transition, which is like, oh, if I miss the curve, all right, let's just wait for Shuri Nimrod,
Yes.
right? Like this is the easy part, but of course at the same time, it's a combo deck that really has like one
Right.
extra combo
Okay,
only.
I'm gonna put
So
you on the spot. All right.
yeah,
It's turn 3. You played a
okay,
multiple man. You have no Phoenix Force in hand, but you do have, let's say, one Nimrod, right? You have like
okay,
your hand is like a Nimrod and a card that goes boom and like a Ghost Spider. Okay?
okay.
Are you blowing up the multiple man or are you saving it for the Nimrod?
Isn't that contextual to what you need to draw? Like if you need
Yes.
to,
That's what I'm saying. Like
if you
there's a
need
bunch of that in this deck.
Yeah, but it's the same for the previous deck as well, right? Like the jet deck whereby you either blow up the multiple man or you like I don't know, blow up your Deadpool. He runs Deadpool, yeah.
Yeah.
So like it's the same, yeah.
Yeah,
So
but like it's just there's just a lot, but like the Deadpool's on the board, right? Like there's just a lot of stress on because like with Deadpool, you know whether you're going to be able to be a Deadpool deck very early because you don't have it.
mm,
Like if you don't have your Deadpool on like turn 3, you're like, okay, I'm not a Deadpool deck. I get it, right? But like if you don't have your Nimrod on turn 3, well, you can still draw it on turn 5. And so you end up in these spots where you have to commit to a line before you have full information on it. And that like that's sort of what bothers me because it puts a lot of
okay,
stress
actually
on your limited resources.
I have my answer for the Shuri Nimrod version.
Okay.
To me, I feel like if there's a Shuri Nimrod option in your deck, I think the scaling is so crazy that you go for that option if you miss your early curve. Because
Okay.
like Shuri Nimrod into Destroy is such a burst of power that you know is guaranteed if you draw that piece. So I think that's something that I would naturally gravitate to.
Okay.
Yeah.
And with that, it's time to end. Thank you so much for watching this episode of 8 Cubes. Of course, welcome back, Lamby series, after a long absence. We're glad to have you back. Lamby, do you have anything to say? As always, you can catch the other episodes of this show on his channel, which is linked in the description.
Yeah, when he asks me if I have anything to say, usually what happens here is I say, if you like what you just saw, do like, comment, subscribe, and be waiting for the next episode on my channel and then back on his channel again. See you guys.